If you're going through some tough times, there are many different forms of therapy that can really help. One you may not know much about is art therapy, where making art is used to help process difficult emotions and experiences under the guidance of a trained art therapist. How art therapy works is up next on Still Time for Joy, where we share practical advice for weathering life's storms and inspiring stories of resilience. Hello, I'm Sandra Levine, host of Still Time for Joy. My guest today is Joanna Flora, a board-certified art therapist who is on the board of directors of the New Jersey Art Therapy Association and who runs a practice in Sparta, New Jersey. Welcome to the show, Joanna.
Hi, Sandy. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So even though art therapy has been around for a good 100 years or more, many people still really don't know much about it. What is art therapy?
Great question. So, art therapy kind of is exactly how it sounds. It is therapy utilizing art. So, we use art materials and the art making process in a therapeutic way to help children, adults, the elderly really work through and process challenges that they are faced with.
How does it actually work? How does the art tie into bringing up old memories? And then what do you do with those memories when they come up?
So, materials can really stimulate somebody to have things come up for them, as well as the making of art can really stimulate things to come up. It usually comes up from a subconscious place. And then as they're going through the process, those memories start to become conscious memories. For example, for victims of sex abuse, we would never use materials such as clay or pottery making, those wet materials, because that could stimulate some of those trauma memories in a negative way. So we really want to help stimulate these things to come up in a productive way so that our clients are able to take this art making process and then eventually turn it into words.
What are some of the materials you do work with your clients?
Really, nothing is off limits. So, in our office, we work with children and families. So, we utilize anything from markers, crayons, paper, paint, sand, soil, recycled materials, cardboard boxes, slime. Really anything. There's no limit on the creative ability of the mind.
I'd like to ask you just to expand on that a little bit more, how it actually works. I'm really interested in understanding this.
So, usually we start our sessions with clients with a soccer ball assessment in our office. And this is a very casual type assessment because it only involves a piece of paper with the image of a soccer ball. And then we utilize markers and stickers. And all of these materials are very stress-free. They're very carefree. They probably shouldn't open up any stress or anything that anybody wouldn't want to come out. But in this process, we really start the feelings conversation. So we'll use stickers like bees to represent anybody who stings you or hurts you. We'll use hearts for love, and we'll use spiders for anybody who scares you. So the materials and the objects, the symbols, I guess, really on those stickers are able to start those conversations.
And then where do you take it from there?
So once we really have a baseline on our clients and we know what materials we can use and can't use, we're able to pull directives to help uncover what really needs to be processed and worked through. Now with children, we have the access to their parents who usually tell us what's been going on, whether they're having nightmares, trouble sleeping, issues at school, bullying. So we're really able to create directives around that. But usually working with adults, we're able to come up with directives to help them kind of discover what's going on for them. There are a ton of therapeutic art directives that really help us assess which way we need to go as an art therapist and how we can start working with our clients in the best way for them.
And I think it's interesting that a lot of us are not in touch with our feelings. We may know that we're not feeling great. We may realize we're a little depressed or we're anxious. Sometimes we don't even know why. So can this help us to get in touch with what is actually bothering us?
100%. So a lot of the times, a lot of these feelings get stuffed. We really stuff them and then we feel them in our bodies. So a lot of the times we'll have physical ailments instead of mental ailments because it's our way of not having to deal with them. Or we'll have the opposite feeling. So sometimes we will be feeling really angry when we actually are really sad because it's easier for that individual to deal with the anger feelings than the sad feelings. So through the art making process, it starts to unravel and it is able to come out in a really safe and appropriate way with the art therapist as the witness to that process. And usually the art therapist is able to ask appropriate questions to help guide those subconscious thoughts into consciousness in a really safe and contained way. So it's not too overstimulating to the client.
And then once you have uncovered some of these thoughts and taken them from the subconscious level to the conscious level, then do you continue as in a typical therapy session way, or where do you take the client from there?
So, in my practice, we always follow the contact of the client. So, if the client continues the conversation about the artwork or about what has happened, we always follow the contact of the client. If the client's not willing or open or doesn't want to talk about it, that's okay too. They might need some time to sit with those feelings for a really long time. They might need to process something else that happens. The thing with our clients is even if we see them every week, life keeps happening. So sometimes we see something that comes up and then we don't get to talk about it for a really long time. And then it peeks its way in again a few months later. And, life is ebbs and flows and we go with the ebb and the flow.
So, Joanna, how did you become interested in this field?
So, I actually was born with a learning disability. I have a visual impairment. I have a conversion issue. So, I actually end up seeing multiples. And it took a really long time for them to figure out that that was what was happening. But over time, they were able to see there would be 4 softballs in my drawing instead of 1, or things that didn't make sense that for there to be more than 1. And from that, they learned that I didn't have the ability to converge my eyes, and I was able to go for vision therapy. And now I have control over it. So yes, there are days that I see a lot of multiples and I can't control it if I have a migraine or a headache or something to that effect. But for the most part, if I see 2 of you, I really know how to work my eye muscles so that I can bring you back and get you back to one Sandy, right? And I'm so grateful that I have that. And from that, I always felt like I really wanted to help other people through the art to be able to figure out what was wrong and not only help what was wrong, but be able to overcome those challenges. So in college, I started working with individuals on the autistic spectrum and really more medically severe individuals, and realized that just making art with them was just an ability to bring them so much joy and so much love, and they had so much passion for it that I was like, I need to go into this for real. And I went into art therapy, and I never turned around since. So from working with individuals on the autism spectrum, I was then able to work with individuals in hospice. And that was a really wild ride for me as a young professional, because through the art making process, I was actually able to determine when people were able to pass away. So a part of art therapy that people don't realize is that there is this art diagnostic ability, and a trained art therapist is really able to diagnose based off the artwork. And it became so apparent that the subconscious could determine when someone was going to pass away. It became something that was happening so routinely that I really needed to take a step away from hospice because I couldn't handle that part of myself. And I really dove deep then into working with children and families instead.
And so you opened your own practice. Tell me a little bit about your practice.
I did. So our practice specializes in children and families. We are a group practice. So we have counselors, social workers, and art therapists. But I'm really fortunate to say that we have the most art therapists. And that is super rare because there are very few art therapists nationwide, but yet alone in the state of New Jersey. So that's a huge accomplishment on our end. But we're able to collaborate and work together to best support children and families with all different gamuts of life.
And who benefits most from art therapy? And what are some of the issues people are trying to work through for both children and adults?
Art therapy is not for any specific grouping of age. Right now our youngest is 2, but the oldest I've worked with has been 103. So really everybody can benefit from art therapy. I know a lot of people think art and art supplies, so they automatically think children, but that's not necessarily true. Children just engage with art materials, and it's a good way to build rapport and connection with children, but really anybody can really benefit and be able to process things that they didn't even know were subconscious or within them, utilizing the art and the art materials and the art making. But we have children, families, adults, they come and process all kinds of things from trauma to depression, anxiety, overstimulation, mood disorders, basically all the things that are just typical run-of-your-mill daily life problems. And then we have bigger problems like loss of a loved one, parents getting divorced, real things that are more long-term. We have significant mental illnesses from schizophrenia to bipolar disorder. So, there really is a huge gamut of things that we support and we can help utilizing art therapy.
And can you give me an example of somebody who has come to you with a specific problem and you've seen such wonderful results from your art therapy sessions?
Yeah, so one of the little kiddos I worked with was 4 years old and really struggled with separation anxiety from her parents. She would melt down, she would go silent, she really couldn't get out of the car, wouldn't be able to transition to kindergarten. And through the art making process, she was able to talk about the things that she didn't even have words for. She was able to make art. She was able to make things to show that that was actually what the fear was. And she was then able to learn how to identify the feeling words. She didn't even know the feeling words to be able to talk about it. So through the artwork, we were able to help her identify the feeling words, then talk about the feeling words. And then we were able to make transitional objects. So they were objects to stay with mom and dad and her little brother so that she was able to transition into school. And then from school, she had a hard time connecting with the peers and her teacher. So we were again able to dive deep into that and build and create things so that she could build connections and rapport with those other people in school.
And also, I know you've worked with veterans, you've worked with first responders. Please give me just one more example of how art therapy has helped.
So I do. I work with a lot of first responders. I recently just did our initial intake soccer ball assessment with a police officer who's experienced extreme PTSD, one of the worst cases I've ever seen. And he was able to identify the people in his life who he actually really needs to spend more time with and put love into versus where his thoughts were going. And his thoughts were going in completely different directions. And he was unable to wrangle those thoughts in. So through his soccer ball and his art making process, he was actually able to figure out how to set up boundaries in his life for others and for himself so that he could actually live the life he wants to live. And sometimes when our brain takes over, we're not able to set up those boundaries. So that was a real clear way. And he uses the picture as a way to be like, nope, I don't want to do that. So he has it in his phone and he'll pull it up when he makes decisions now.
And that's something I wanted to ask you about is boundaries. What you do is very difficult work. You're holding space for people who have often been through very traumatic experiences. How do you keep it from affecting you personally?
So I actually do a lot of things for myself to really keep myself in check and to make sure that my feelings aren't impacting my clients' feelings. So For starters, I'm in my own supervision where I meet with my own supervisor to make sure that my things aren't spilling over. I'm also in my own therapy, and that is really important. I also schedule a lot of time for myself for self-care. Every quarter, I take a week off for vacation with my family to like kind of disconnect and then reconnect with my family, and then I can regroup when I come back. And that is just the best way for me to just stay grounded in who I am and keep myself separate from my clients.
Good for you. Keep that up. That's
Yes,
important.
it's very important.
So, I also want to hear about the educational requirements for becoming an art therapist. In New Jersey, you need to have a license, and all art therapists, true art therapists, have at least a master's degree, right?
Correct.
So, I know in every state in the United States, it's not required to have a license. I think in approximately 2/3 of states, there is no license required. Tell me a little bit about the educational requirements you've had to go through and why you feel it's important to work with a licensed art therapist.
So, this is a very big question and it's actively enrolling as we speak. So, originally, when I graduated from grad school, I had to get so many hours to really say that I was an art therapist. So, I completed all my hours, submitted, and that's how I got something called my ATR. So, an ATR is an art therapist registered, and that means I hold the experience of a registered art therapist. Now, I have an ATR BC, and the BC stands for board certified. And to become board certified, you have to take an exam, just like a state licensing exam. And that exam really makes sure you know and master the material. So in all 50 states, I highly recommend, if you're looking for an art therapist, find somebody who has their ATR BC or their ATR and is under supervision with somebody who has their ATR BC. Now, in 15 other states, we do have licenses. The label of the licenses ranges by state to state. Here in New Jersey, we have the LPAT, that's the Licensed Professional Art Therapist. That is a category in New Jersey, which is different than other states because it also includes music therapists and drama therapists in New Jersey. In New York, which is, a little ways away, there's only the LCAT, which is Licensed Creative Arts Therapist. So every state differs, so just make sure you do the research for your state. But it's really important to work with somebody who is licensed because they actually have the knowledge, the background, the experience, the training, and they're up to date with their trainings. We have required education we have to do every 2 years to stay up to date on the research and up to date with what's going on in the field and to make sure that we are doing things correctly. So it's really important that you work with somebody who is licensed and has the appropriate education. Unfortunately, there are people who like to hang up their shingle and say that they are art therapists, and they are not. And what happens here in these situations is that they expose people to things that they shouldn't. So they might be working with materials that could cause more harm than good. They might leave people exposed to things that they weren't ready to talk about yet. So they actually can cause more trauma, and that's the last thing we want to happen. So if you're ever in question, you can also reach out to your state board. There's the licensing board, and the licensing board is there to protect the public. And you can also reach out to the Art Therapy Association within your state. So I'm on the New Jersey Art Therapy Association, and if we go by NJATA, so if you go on our website, you can find a list of all the licensed professionals in New Jersey. But every state or every region has their own association, and they can link you with somebody who's the most appropriate clinician with the appropriate background.
And you're also studying now to become a licensed professional counselor, a psychoanalyst. And what will that enable you to do in your practice that you can't do right now?
So, as a licensed professional counselor, I would be able to basically mold the two modalities together and give more supports than just art therapy. So counselors are able to do things such as career counseling and other types of supports that I think as my clients grow, they sometimes start to need, and then I have to refer them out. And I get a lot of pushback and resistance from that because they're bonded. They're here. They don't want to go somewhere else. They want to stay here. So we really want to be able to support them with that and let them stay if they really feel most comfortable here. So that'll give us a little bit more ability to support our clients in that way. And then as a psychoanalyst, there isn't really a license for a psychoanalyst, but it is a much deeper level of education in the mental health work. It's a way to dive into the subconscious even more, and we see that huge success with a lot of mental illnesses such as schizophrenia and a lot of those personality disorders. It really will help give the deepest level of treatment to those individuals.
I think we've made some progress in society with destigmatizing mental health issues, but do you think we still have a long way to go? And if so, what else can we do, and what should we be doing to make treatment more accessible?
It is an uphill battle. I mean, we got to keep on hiking up that mountain. So even though everybody is learning about mental health and we understand it, we still feel stigmatized to even seek out services for ourselves. So, I work with this first responder population, and they're very skittish to come to start treatment. They are very embarrassed. They're very worried about people are no longer going to see them as these heroes because they are seeking this mental health support. And in fact, it should be the opposite. We should be praising them for seeking the mental health support. So I think that is a huge uphill battle that we are very much working against. Huge wins to push us back down that hill. I think if we actually mandate mental health procedures just to be part of natural day-to-day lives for those on the front lines with really any first responder, I think they really should just have unlimited access, and it should just be built into their schedule. I think that would really help a lot of those PTSD things or those things that get kind of shoved down. So what happens is these individuals are parents, they are husbands, they are wives, they are brothers, and then the things that happen to them impact their families, impact the civilians they work with. So even if we just took that little section of the population, it could have trickle effects to so many members of society. And I think we can do that in all aspects of society. If we find these target areas that really just need a lot more mental health support, it will have impacts and it will trickle through because of all of our connections.
And I want to ask you about one more population I know that you really like to help, and that is moms. I know you help moms who have postpartum depression and other issues. Talk to me a little bit about how art therapy can benefit new moms.
This is actually very rare, and most people don't know about this. So I'm so glad that you asked this question. So I am perinatal mental health trained, and that is for individuals who have postpartum anxiety. They're having a hard time conceiving, anything that has to do with that kind of aspect and time frame in life. And usually when we see postpartum depression, it sometimes can coexist with a kind of psychosis, and it gets really scary to talk about. A lot of the times we're afraid if we say these things out loud, then they're going to come true, so we don't say them. And if we don't say them, then they're not going to come true, but then we also are holding on to them and we're not able to get it out and get the help we need. So art therapy is a great way to process those things and to even get that energy out of our bodies so that we're able to move forward and get linked up with the other supports, whether it be medication management or coping skills or coping strategies to help that individual. Also with grief and loss, if we have a miscarriage or a stillborn birth, a lot of that there's no words for. Yeah. And that's not something that we can just spew about. It's a lot of sitting in the feelings and sitting in the emotion. And the art materials really act like play. And through play and through art, we're really able to get to the heart of the wound.
Yeah. So I want to ask you, when you work with a child who has perhaps undergone some very traumatic event when you work with a veteran or a first responder who has PTSD, or a new mom who is struggling, and you work with them for a while and you see progress, you see the anxiety lessened, you see the depression lessened, you see them being even happier. How does that make you feel to know what a difference your work is making?
It's the best thing in the whole wide world. That's why I do this. That's my passion. That's my drive. That's why I'm not stopping on just sticking with one area of expertise, because there's just so many people who need help, and that's what fuels my fire.
What kind of changes have you seen that have just really touched you?
So I'll give you an example with my longest client of all time. I've worked with him now for 14 years. And when I first started working with him, we could only have sessions for about 20 minutes if we were lucky. He could not really walk. He couldn't really talk. He wasn't able to get out of bed. He was just so severely depressed, quite possibly the worst you've ever seen. And beyond the decade we've worked together, he's gone through exceptional medical treatments, from ECT to all different kinds of hallucinogenic medications and things that have made zero progress for him. So I've really bared all of his pain with him, and disappointment and his family, really, that these things have not worked. And there seems like there's no light at the end of the tunnel. And about 4 years ago, we decided to go off all medication and just really stick with art therapy and doing a lot of art therapy. And he slowly started to come out and come out and come out. And then he got a job, and then he was able to hold 2 jobs, and then he got a dog, and then he got a license, and now he's about to graduate from CCM. He, has more hobbies than I could imagine. He has a boat ton of friends. He is just a wonderful human being, and I love to spend time with him, and I love to be a part of his process and his journey and support him, and I could not be prouder of him.
That's an amazing story, and I'm sure you have many more. Joanna Flora, you're doing amazing work, wonderful work, helping people become happier, healthier, even more joyful through your work as a professional art therapist. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. This was incredible.
If you found today's show helpful, please share the information with someone who needs it, and follow Still Time for Joy for more practical tips on weathering life's storms, as well as inspiring stories of people who have turned their pain into purpose. Please consider supporting the work that goes into producing the show on Patreon. Follow Sandra Levine Productions on Facebook and YouTube, and learn more at sandralevine.com.